Hi, it's fine today. ミッキーです。大光です。流星七郎です。じゃあ、続きをやっていきます。今13ページ。Political and economical systems. We will produce peace and prosperity for all. Countries that join this unstoppable march of progress will be rewarded with peace and prosperity sooner. Countries that try to resist the in, inevitable will suffer the consequences until they too see the light, open their borders and liberalize their societies, their politics and their markets. It may take time, but eventually even North Korea, Iraq and El Salvador will look like Denmark or lower. In the 1990s and 2000s, this story became a global mantra. Many governments from Brazil to India adopted liberal recipes in an attempt to join the GX inexorable march of history. Those failing, those failing to do so seemed like fossils from a bygone era. In 1997, U.S. President Bill Clinton confidently rebuked the Chinese government that its refusal to liberalize Chinese politics puts it on the wrong side of history. However, since the global financial crisis of 2008, people all over the world have become increasingly disillusioned with the liberal story. Walls and firewalls are back to vogue. Resistance to immigration and trade agreement is mounting. Ostensibly democratic governments undermine the independence of the judicial system, restrict the freedom of the press, and portray any opposition as treason. treason. Strongmen in countries such as Turkey and Russia experiment with new types of illiberal democracies and downright dic- dictatorships. Today, few world confidently declare that the Chinese Communist Party is on the wrong side of history. ちょっと紙をまとめます。だいぶ長い。ちょっと銭湯に行ってきて髪が乾いて邪魔になってきたので。あれ、ゴム紐がないぞ。マジか。マジなのか。マジでゴム紐がない。あった。はい、OK。 The year 2016, marked by the Brexit vote in Britain and the rise of Donald Trump in the United States, signified the moment when this tidal wave of disillusionment reached the core liberal states of Western Europe and North America. Whereas a few years ago, Whereas なんだっけ品質単語なのでとりあえずウェブリをっておきます。ところがWhereas a few years ago, Americans and Europeans were still trying to liberalize Iraq and Libya at the point of the gun. Many people in Kentucky and Yorkshire have now come to see the liberal vision as either undesirable or unattainable. Some discovered a liking for the old hierarchical world. And they just don't want to give up their racial, national, or gendered privileges. Others have concluded, rightly or wrongly, that liberalization and globalization are a huge racket empowering a tiny elite at the expense of the masses. In 1939, humans were offered their global stories to choose from. In 1969, just two. In 1999, a single story seemed to prevail. In 2019, we are down to zero. No wonder that the liberal elites, who dominated much of the world in recent decades, have entered a state of shock and desolation. To have one story is the most reassuring situation of all. Everything is perfectly clear. To be suddenly left without any story is terrifying. Nothing makes any sense. From killing mosquitoes to killing thoughts. The mood of disorientation and impending doom is exacerbated by the accelerating pace of technological disruption. The liberal political system has been shaped during the industrial era to manage a world of steam engines, oil refineries, and television sets. It finds it difficult to deal with the ongoing revolutions in information technology and biotechnology. Both politicians and voters are barely able to comprehend the new technologies, let alone regulate their explosive potential. Since the 1990s, the internet has changed the world probably more than any other factor. Yet the internet revolution was directed by engineers more than by political parties. Did you ever thought about the internet? The democratic system is still struggling to understand what hit it, and is hardly equipped to deal with the next shocks, such as the rise of AI and the blockchain revolution. Already today, computers have made the financial system to financial system so complicated that few humans can understand it. As AI improves, we might soon reach a point when no human can make sense of finance anymore. What will that do to the political process? Can you imagine a government that waits humbly for algorithm to approve its budget or its new tax reform? Meanwhile, peer-to-peer blockchain networks and cryptocurrencies like この単語調べよう。cryptocurrencies 仮想通貨かやっぱり多分仮想通貨だ。暗号通貨だな。Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin might completely revamp the monetary system, so that radical tax reforms will be inevitable. For example, it might become impossible or irrelevant to tax dollars because most transactions will involve only the exchange of information. Without a clear-cut transfer of national currency, or any currency at all, government might therefore need to invent entirely new taxes, perhaps an information tax paid on information and in information rather than in dollars. Will the political system manage to deal with the crisis before it runs out of money? Even more importantly, the twin revolutions in infotech and biotech could restructure not just economies and societies but our very bodies and minds. In the past, we humans have learned to control the world outside us, but we had very little control over the world inside us. We knew how to build a dam and stop a river from flowing, but we did not know how to stop the body from aging. We knew how to design an irrigation system, but we had no idea how to design a brain. If mosquitoes buzzed in our ears and disturbed our sleep, we knew how to kill the mosquitoes. But if a thought buzzed in our mind and kept us awake at night, most of us did not know how to kill the thought. The revolutions in biotech and infotech will give us control of the world inside us and will enable us to engineer and manufacture life. We will learn how to design brains, extend lives, and kill souls at our discretion. Nobody knows what the consequences will be. Humans were always far better at inventing tools than using them wisely. It is easier to manipulate a river by building a dam across it than it is to predict all the complex consequences this will have for the wider ecological system. Similarly, it will be easier to redirect the flow of our minds than to divine what it will do to our personal psychology or to our social systems. ちょっと目薬をさします。In the past, we have gained the power to manipulate the world around us and to reshape the entire planet. But because we didn't understand the complexity of the global economy, the changes we made in inadvertently disrupted the entire ecological system, and now we face an ecological collapse. In the coming century, biotech and infotech will give us the power to manipulate the world inside us and reshape ourselves. But because we don't understand the complexity of our own minds, the changes we will make might upset for our mental system to such an extent that it too might break down. The revolutions in biotech and infotech are made by engineers, entrepreneurs, and scientists who are hardly aware of the political implications of their decisions, and who certainly don't represent anyone. Can parliaments and parties take matter into their own hands? At present, it does not seem so. Technological disruption is not even a leading item on the political agenda. Choose during the 2016 US presidential race. The main reference to disruptive technology concerned Hillary Clinton's email debacle, and despite all the talk about job losses, neither candidate addressed the potential impact of automation. Donald Trump warned voters that the Mexicans and Chinese will take their jobs, and that they should therefore build a wall on the Mexican border. ちょっと眉毛を剃ります。最近眉毛を整えてないから気になって。もうやべえくらいボサ眉なんで。でも私大根はね、眉毛の外側がすげえ薄いんですよ。写真撮ると本当に口切るキアみたいな眉毛になって。でもね、ボサ眉はボサ眉で許せないので。 ちゃんとけじめをつけます。まあこんな感じかな。He never he disillusionment. He never warned voters that the the algorithms will take the jobs. Nor did he suggest building a firewall on the border with California. This might be one of the reasons, though not the only one. Why even voters in the heartlands of the liberal West are losing faith in the liberal story and in the democratic process. Ordinary people may not understand artificial intelligence and biotechnology, but they can sense that the future is passing them by. In 1938, the condition of the common person in the USSR, Germany or USA may have been grave, but he was constantly told that he was the most important thing in the world, and that he was the future, provided of course that he was an ordinary person rather than a Jew or an African. He looked at the propaganda posters, which typically depicted coal miners, steel workers, and housewives in heroic poses, and saw himself there. I am in that poster. I am the hero of the future. In 2018, the common person feels increasingly irrelevant. Lots of mysterious words are bandied around excitedly in TED Talks. Government think tanks, government think tanks and high-tech conferences, globalization, blockchain, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and common people may well suspect that none of these words are about them. The liberal story was the story of ordinary people. How can it remain relevant to a world of cyborgs and networked algorithms? In the 20th century, the masses revolted against exploitation and sought to translate their vital role in the economy into political power. Now the masses fear irrelevance, and they are frantic to use their remaining political power before it is too late. Brexit and the rise of Trump might choose demonstrate an opposite, opposite trajectory to that of traditional socialist revolutions. The Russia, Chinese, and Cuban revolutions were made by people who were vital for the economy, but who lacked political power. はい、18ページ目。In 2016, Trump and Brexit were supported by many people who still enjoyed political power, but who feared that they were losing their economic worth. Perhaps in the 21st century, populist revolts will be staged not against an economic elite that exploits people, but against an economic elite that does not need them anymore. This may well be a losing battle. It is much harder to struggle against irrelevance than against exploitation. エクスプロイトってなんだっけ。手柄業功績。開発する開拓する。The liberal panics. This is not the first time the liberal story has faced a crisis of confidence. Ever since this story gained global influence in the second half of the 19th century, it has endured periodic crises. The first era of globalization and liberalization ended in the bloodbath of the First World War. In the 1930s and early 1940s, fascism looked irresistible from the 1950s to the 1970s. It seemed that the future belonged to communism. But every time, liberalism managed to overcome the crisis, learn from its mistakes, and even adopt its rivals' best ideas. In particular, the liberal story learned from communism to expand the circle of empathy and to value equality alongside liberty. Whereas in the late 19th century, the liberal story cared mainly about the liberties and privileges of middle-class European men. By the late 20th century, it had come to champion the cause of working-class people, women, minorities, and non-Westerners. Yet the current crisis of liberalism is different from the crisis of the 1930s and the 1960s. The three major movements that fought one another in the 20th century all had a coherent vision for the entire human species, be it global domination, revolution, or liberation. Today, in contrast, the people who reject the liberal story don't offer any coherent alternative, and actually take pride in that. Donald Trump's main message is that it's not America's job to formulate and promote any global vision whatsoever. いつまでもうこんな暑いのに大根は随分暑そうな服着てますね。まあ大根の冬服がこれにかなり似てるから選んだんですけど。どこまで読んだっけ。America's job to formulate and promote any global vision whatsoever. Similarly, the British Brigadiers barely have a plan for the future of the disunited kingdom. The future of Europe and of the world is far beyond the horizon. Most people who voted for Trump and Brexit didn't reject the liberal package in its entirety. They lost faith mainly in its globalizing part. They still believe in democracy, free markets, human rights, and social responsibility, but they think these fine ideas can stop at the border. Indeed, they believe that in order to preserve liberty and prosperity in Yorkshire or Kentucky, it is best to build a wall on the border and adopt illiberal policies towards foreigners. The rising Chinese superpower presents an almost mirror image. It is worthy of liberalizing its domestic politics, but it has adopted a far more liberal approach to the rest of the world. In fact, when it comes to free trade and international cooperation, Xi Jinping looks like Obama's real successor, having put Marxism-Leninism on the back burner. China seems rather happy with the liberal international order. Resurgent Russia Resurgent Russia sees itself as a far more forceful rival of the global liberal order. But though it has reconstituted its military might, it is ideologically bankrupt. Vladimir Vladimir Putin is certainly popular both in Russia and among various right-wing movements across the world. Yet he has no global world view that might attract unemployed Spanish Spaniards, disgruntled Brazilians, or starry-eyed students in Cambridge. Russia does offer an alternative model to liberal democracy, but this model is not a coherent political ideology. Rather, it is a practice in which a number of oligarchies monopolize most of a country's wealth and power, and then use their control of the media to hide their activities and comment the rule. Democracy is based on Abraham Lincoln's principle that you can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time. But you cannot fool all the people all the time. If a government is corrupt and fails to improve people's lives, Enough citizens will eventually realize this and replace the government. But government control of the media undermines Lincoln's logic because it prevents citizens from realizing the truth. Though its monopoly over the media, the ruling oligarchy can repeatedly blame all its failures on others and divert attention to explore threats, either real or imaginary. When you live under such an oligarchy, there is always some crisis or other that takes priority over boring stuff such as healthcare and pollution. If the nation is facing external invasion or di- diab- diabolical subversion, who has time to worry about overcrowded hospitals and polluted rivers? By manufacturing a never-ending stream of crises, a corrupt oligarchy can prolong its rule indefinitely. 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 Oh. はあ、英書を読むのって楽しいけど難しいけども楽しい。一度日本語版を読んだこともあって、ある程度内容がわかるから難しい単語もあるけど。Yet though enduring in practice, this organic model appeals to no one. Unlike other ideologies that proudly expound the vision, ruling oligarchy って何？加藤政治。Ruling oligarchies are not proud of their practices, and they tend to use other ideologies as a smoke screen. Choose Russia pretends to be a democracy, and its leadership proclaims allegiance to the values of Russian nationalism and Orthodox Orthodox Christianity rather than to oligarchy. Right-wing extremists in France and Britain may well rely on Russian help and express admiration for Putin, But even the voters would not like to live in a country that actually copies the Russian model, a country with endemic corruption, malfunctioning services, no rule of law, and staggering inequality. According to some measures, Russia is one of the most unequal countries in the world, with 87% of wealth concentrated in the hands of the richest 10% of the people. How many working class supporters of the Front National want to copy this wealth distribution pattern in France? Humans vote Humans vote with their feet. In my travels around the world, I have met numerous people in many countries who wish to immigrate to the USA, to Germany, to Canada, or to Australia. I have met a few who want to move to China or Japan. ジャパンもチャイナくらい人気ねえんだ。But I am yet to meet a single person with dreams of immigrating to Russia. As for global Islam, it attracts mainly those who were born in its lap, while it may appeal to some people in Syria and Iraq, and even to alienated alienated Muslim youths in Germany and Britain. It is it is hard to see Greece or South Africa, not to mention Canada or South Korea, joining a global caliphate as the remedy to their problems. In this case, two people vote with their feet. From every Muslim youth from Germany who traveled to the Middle East to live under a Muslim theocracy, probably 100 Middle Eastern youths would have liked to make the opposite journey and start a new life for themselves in liberal Germany. This might imply that the present crisis of faith is less severe than its predecessor. Any liberal who is driven to despair by the event of the last few years should just recollect how much worse things looked in 1980, 1938, or 1968. What we are seeing in recent years is not a complete abandonment of the liberal story. Rather, we are witnessing a shift from a set-menu approach to a buffet mentality. 43分やって10ページくらいかな。体がバキバキ曲がってる。こんな芸人見たことある。It is difficult to understand current developments, partly because liberalism was never a single thing. Liberalism cherishes liberty, but liberty has different meanings in different contexts. Just for one person, liberalism implies free elections and democratization. Another person thinks that liberalism means trade agreements and globalization. And a third associates liberalism with gay marriage and abortion. Liberalism offers diverse recommendations for behavior in the economic, political, and personal fields, and on both the national and international level. The following table summarizes the main components of liberalism. The liberalism set menu: economic field, national level; economic field, political field, personal field; national level, international level; free markets, private privatization, low taxes; free trade, global immigration, low tariffs; free elections, rule of law, minority rights; peaceful relations, multilateral cooperation, international laws and organizations; free choices, individualism, diversity, gender equality, ease of personal movement and immigration. The liberal story that dominated the world in recent decades argued that there are strong and essential links between all the above six components. You can't have one without the other, because progress in one field both necessitates and simulates progress in other fields. For example, free elections are essential for the success of free markets. Without democracy, markets soon fall prey to cronyism and government corruption. Similarly, gender equality promotes international peace, for wars are usually fueled by by patriarchal values and macho politicians. Meanwhile, global global economic integration goes hand in hand with the freedom of individual consumers. If I can choose from 100 global brands rather than just 3 national brands, I enjoy more individual freedom, and so forth. Consequently, if a country wants to enjoy one dish from the liberal set menu, such as economic liberalization, it has no choice but to take the other dishes too.にゃん。モニターの前に立つな。マイクの前に立つな、ジェシカ。ほら、2位が下向いたままになっちゃうでしょ。2位の膝の上に乗るな。爪が痛いんだよ。早くどっか行け。What is now common to populist and nationalist movements throughout the world is that even if they describe themselves as anti-liberal, none of them rejects liberalism wholesale. Rather, that reject the set menu approach and want to pick and choose their own dishes from a liberal buffet. Choose Trump is still very much in favor of free markets and privatization, but he thinks he can have these goods while undermining multilateral cooperation and even free trade. China supports free trade, and its Belt and Road initiative is one of the most ambitious globalization projects ever envisioned. But it is far less enthusiastic about free elections. The British Brexiters up, uphold democracy and have nothing against individualism, but they don't like the idea of multilateral cooperation and of giving too much power to international organizations. Victor Orban, Victor Orban has defined his regime as an illiberal democracy, arguing that you can have free elections in Hungary without commin, committing yourself to things such as minority rights, diversity, and individualism. The one dish that almost everybody wants, at least in theory, is peaceful international relations. This is the chocolate cake of the liberal buffet. In contrast, the one dish that almost nobody desires, the global salary, is immigration. Even some of the staunchest supporters of democracy, individualism, and multilateral cooperation have become decidedly lukewarm about allowing in too many immigrants. 声が枯れる。首が曲がったままになってる。おい、起きろ。It remains to be seen, however, whether the buffet approach can work. The food analogy might be very misleading. In restaurants, set menus are arbitrary assemblage of in independent dishes. Yet the liberal story always insisted that the liberal system is a living organism made of mutually dependent organs. While you can easily separate the soup from the dessert, you cannot separate the heart from the lungs. Can Trump really promote free markets in the USA while under, under, undermining free trade on the global level? Can the Chinese Communist Party continue to enjoy the fruits of economic liberalization without making any movement towards political liberalization? Can Hungarians have democracy without personal liberties? Or is Orban's illiberal democracy just a nicer way of saying this dictatorship? Can international peace survive in the world of racing border wars and intensifying trade wars? The buffet approach might well result in the utter breakdown of the liberal system on both the national and international levels. If this happens, what alternative visions might replace the liberal story? One option might be to completely give up on having a global story of any kind, and instead seek shelter with nationalists, and religious tales. In the 20th century, nationalist movements were an extremely important political player, but they lacked a coherent vision for the future of the world. Other than supporting the division of the globe into independent nation states, two Indonesian nationalists fought against Dutch domination, and the Vietnamese nationalists wanted a free Vietnam. But there was no Indonesian or Vietnamese story for humanity as a whole. When it came time to explain how Indonesia, Vietnam, and all other free nations should relate to one another, and how humans should deal with global problems such as the threat of nuclear war, nationalists invariably turned to either liberal or communist ideas. But if both liberalism and communism are now discredited, maybe humans should abandon the very idea of a simple single global story. After all, want all want all these all these global stories. Even communism, the product of Western imperialism. Why should Vietnamese villagers put their faith in the brainchild of a German from Trier and a Manchester industrialist? Maybe each country should adopt a different idiosyncratic path, defined, defined, defined by its own ancient, ancient traditions. Perhaps even Westerners should take a break from trying to learn the world and focus on their own affairs for a chance. 1ページ読むのに3分ちょい。そしてこの本はなんと400ページくらいありますね。でもこっちはもう注釈だから読まなくていいけど。This is arguably already happening all over the globe. As a vacuum left by the breakdown of liberalism is tentatively filled by nostalgic fantasies and about some local global past. Donald Trump coupled his calls for American isolationism with a promise to make America great again. As if the USA of the 1980s or 1950s was a perfect society that Americans should somehow recreate in the 21st century. The Brexiteers dream of making Britain an independent power, as if they were still living in the days of Queen Victoria, and as if splendid isolation were a viable policy for the era of the internet and global warming. Chinese elites have rediscovered their native imperial and Confucian legacies as a supplement or even substitute for the doubtful Marxist 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 ideology that imported from the West. In Russia, Putin's official vision is not to build a corrupt oligarchy, but rather to restrict the old totalist empire. A century after the Bolshevik Revolution, Putin promises a return to ancient tourist glories with an autocratic government buoyed by Russian nationalism and Orthodox piety, spreading its might from the Baltic to the Caucasus. Similar nostalgic dreams that mix nationalist attachment with religious traditions underpin regimes in India, Poland, Turkey, and numerous other countries. Now, now, nowhere are these fantasies more extreme than in the Middle East, where Islamists want to copy the systems established by the Prophet Muhammad in the city of Medina 1400 years ago, while fundamentalist Jews in Israel outdo even the Islamists and dream of going back to 2500 years to biblical times. Members of Israel's ruling coalition government talk, talk to what talk openly about their hope of もう首がぐるんと回ってる。どこまでなんだっけ。The hope of expanding modern Israel's borders to much more closely those of biblical Israel, of reinstating biblical law, and even of rebuilding the ancient temple of Yahweh in Jerusalem in place of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Liberal elites look in horror at these developments and hope that humanity will return to the liberal path in time to avert disaster. In his final speech to United Nations in September 2016, President Obama warned his listeners against retreating into a world sharply divided and ultimately in conflict along age-old lines of nation and tribe and race and religion. Instead, he said, the principles of open markets and accountable governance of democracy and human rights and international law remain firmest foundation for human progress in this century. あ、あと3ページで第1章が終わるからそこまでやっちゃいます。希望が見えてきた。はあ、声が枯れてきた。Obama has lately pointed out that despite the numerous shortcomings of the liberal package, it has a much better record than any of its alternatives. Most humans never enjoyed greater peace or prosperity than they did under the aegis of liberal order of the early 21st century. For the first time in history, infectious disease kill fewer people than old age. Famine kills fewer people than obesity, and violence kills fewer people than accidents. But liberalism has no obvious answers to the biggest problems we face: ecological collapse and technological disruption. Liberalism traditionally relied on economic growth to magically solve difficult social and political conflicts. Liberalism reconciled the proletariat with the bourgeoisie, the faithful with the artists, athletes, the natives with the immigrants, and the Europeans with the Asians, by promising everybody a larger slice of the pie. With a constantly growing pie. That was possible. However, economic growth will not save the global ecosystem. Just the opposite. It is the cause of the ecological crisis, and economic growth will not solve technological disruption. It is predicated on the invention of more and more disruptive technologies. The liberal story and the logic of free market capitalism encourage people to have grand expectations during the latter part of the 20th century. Each generation, whether in Houston, Shanghai, Istanbul, or Sao Paulo,オールしてるので皮膚の調子が最悪になってます。ボリボリ聞き苦しい音を聞かせて申し訳ありません。The liberal story and the logic of free market capitalism enjoyed better education, superior healthcare, and larger incomes than the one that came before it. In coming decades, however, owing to a combination of technological disruption もぐるっとこうレベルよっとこうand ecological meltdown. The younger generation might be lucky to just stay in place. We are consequently left with the task of creating an updated story for the world, just as the upheavals of the Industrial Revolution gave, gave birth to the novel ideologies of the 20th century. So the coming revolutions is in biotechnology and information technology are likely to require fresh visions. The next decades might therefore the characterized by intense soul searching and by formulating new social and political models. Could liberalism reinvent itself yet again? Just as it did in the wake of the 1930s and 1960s crisis, emerging as more attractive than ever before, could traditional religion and nationalism provide the answers that escape the liberals? And could they use ancient wisdom to fashion an up-to-date worldview? Or perhaps the time has come to make a clean break with the past and craft a completely new story that goes beyond not just the world gods and nations, but even the core modern values of liberty and equality. At present, humankind is far from reaching any consensus on these questions. We are still in the nihilist moment of disillusionment and anger. After people have lost faith in the old stories, but before they have embraced a new one. So what next? The first step is to tone down the pro- prophecies of doom and switch from panic mode to bewilderment. Panic is a form of hubris. Hubris. It it comes from the smug feeling that I know exactly where the world is heading. Down. Bewilderment is more humble and therefore more clear-sighted. If you feel like running down the street crying, the apocalypse is upon us, try telling yourself, no, it's not that truth is. I just don't understand what's going on in the world. The following chapters will try to clarify some of the bewildering new possibilities we face and how we might proceed from here. But before exploring potential solutions to humanity's predicaments, we need a better grasp of the challenge technology poses. The revolutions in information technology and biotechnology are still in their infancy, and it is debatable to what extent they are really responsible for the current crisis of liberalism. Most people in Birmingham, Istanbul, St. Petersburg, and Mumbai are only dimly aware, if at all, of the rise of artificial intelligence and its potential impact on their lives. It is undoubtable, however, that the technological revolutions will gather momentum in the next few decades, and we will confront humankind with the hardest trials we have ever encountered. Any story that seeks to gain humanity's allegiance will be tested above all in its ability to deal with the twin revolutions in infotech and biotech. If liberalism, nationalism, Islam, or some novel creed wishes to shape the world of the year 2050, it will need not only to make sense of artificial intelligence, big data algorithms, and bioengineering. It will also need to incorporate them into a new, meaningful narrative. To understand the nature of this technological challenge, perhaps it would be best to start with the job market. Since 2015, 2050, I have been traveling around the world talking with government officials, but business people, social activists, and school kids about the human predicament. Whenever they become impatient or bored by all the tech or by all the talk of artificial intelligence, big data algorithms, and bioengineering, I usually need to mention just one magic word to snap them back to attention: jobs. The technological revolution might soon push billions of humans out of the jobs market and create a massive new unless useless class, leading to social and political upheavals that no existing ideology knows how to handle. All the talk about technology and ideology might sound abstract and remote, but the very real prospect of mass unemployment or personal unemployment leaves nobody indifferent. はい、第一章、ディスイリュージョンメントが終わりました。はい、ここまで1時間18分。ちょっと待ってから、だいたい1時間半くらいかな。思ったよりいいペースだな。正直、一つやるのに3日かかると思ってたから。1日で一生分読めたのは結構な収穫。嘘 ?43 問全部再生されてんの俺。マジでゼロだと思った。いや、見てくださった方本当にありがとうございます。皆さんの関心のおかげで勉強ができてます。頑張ります。とりあえずこの一冊の読破を早いところ で、本当、トーイックの勉強もしなきゃいけないし、まあ、全体的にオンライン英会話もあるし、もう全面的にね、働かずに食える身分なんで、勉強していきたいと思います。働かずに食える身分が続くうちに。